Late on October 24, American radar detects Japanese carriers to the north, exactly as Sho-1 intended. Admiral Halsey now faces a critical decision. He can remain guarding the San Bernardino Strait to block Kurita, or he can seize the chance to destroy the Japanese carriers that escaped destruction earlier in the war. Doctrine, ambition, and incomplete intelligence push him toward the carriers. Halsey orders his entire Third Fleet north, leaving the strait unguarded. Confusion and poor communication means 7th Fleet commanders assume Halsey's battleships are still covering the passage. They are not. In the early hours of October 25, Kurita's surviving force slips through San Bernardino Strait and heads south along the coast of Samar. At dawn, his battleships and cruisers suddenly encounter Taffy 3, a small group of escort carriers and destroyers assigned to support troops ashore. Both sides are stunned. American sailors watch in disbelief as the horizon fills with towering battleships, while Kurita believes he has stumbled upon American fleet carriers and orders an immediate attack. Within minutes, the guns of Yamato and her escorts open fire, marking the first time Japanese surface ships ever engage American carriers directly. Against overwhelming odds, the Americans respond with extraordinary courage. Rear Admiral Clifton Spragg orders his carriers to flee eastward while launching every aircraft available, even those without weapons. Destroyers lay thick smoke screens and charge directly at the Japanese fleet, firing torpedoes and guns until their ships are shattered. USS Howell and USS Johnston are torn apart under relentless fire, their crews fighting to the very end. American pilots attack in chaotic waves, dropping whatever weapons they have and strafing decks to sow confusion. Rain squalls and smoke obscure the battlefield, disrupting Japanese gunnery. Kurita, battered by air attacks and still convinced he is facing a much stronger enemy force, hesitates. Just as Japanese fire begins to seriously damage the fleeing carriers, he makes one of the most controversial decisions in naval history. Kurita orders a withdrawal. His fleet turns back toward San Bernardino Strait, abandoning its chance to attack the invasion fleet in Leyte Gulf. Moments later, a new and horrifying phase of the war emerges. Japanese pilots launch deliberate suicide attacks, crashing their aircraft directly into American ships. One of these attacks sinks the escort carrier USS St. Lo, shocking Allied commanders and sailors alike. What had once been rare acts of desperation becomes official policy. Over the following months, kamikaze attacks will sink or damage dozens of Allied ships and kill thousands. But even this terrifying tactic cannot alter the outcome of the war. While Kurita retreats, Halsey finally destroys Ozawa's carrier force off Cape Engano. Among the ships sunk is Zuitaku, the last surviving carrier from the attack on Pearl Harbor. As she sinks, her crew assembles on deck, lowers the flag, and salutes, marking the symbolic end of Japan's carrier fleet. When the Battle of Leyte Gulf finally ends, the scale of destruction is immense. Japan has lost much of its remaining surface navy and thousands of experienced sailors. The Imperial Japanese Navy will never again mount a major offensive operation. Although historians continued to debate whether the Americans could have achieved an even greater victory, the result is undeniable. Control of the seas has passed permanently to the United States. MacArthur returns to the Philippines, fulfilling his promise, but the campaign to liberate the islands will be long, bitter, and costly. Leyte Gulf marks not just the collapse of Japanese naval power, but the moment the outcome of the Pacific War becomes inevitable. From this point forward, Japan can only delay defeat. The road ahead, through Manila, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and finally to the doorstep of the Japanese home islands, will demand immense sacrifice. But after Leyte Gulf, the end of the war is no longer a question of if, only when.
By late 1944, the Pacific War is entering its decisive phase, and the Philippine Islands are about to become the center of the largest naval battle ever fought. For Japan, the Philippines are not just another battlefield, they are the lifeline of the empire. Through these islands flows oil from the Dutch East Indies, fuel without which Japan's navy, air force, and industry will collapse. Losing the Philippines would mean slow strangulation, an economic and military death sentence. For the United States, capturing the islands would break Japan's defensive perimeter and open the final path toward the home islands themselves. But for General Douglas MacArthur, the coming battle carries a deeper weight. In 1942, he was forced to abandon the Philippines as Japanese forces swept across the islands. Before leaving, he made a promise that echoed around the world: "I shall return." Now, 2 years later, that promise is about to be fulfilled. After months of internal debate, American commanders finally approve MacArthur's plan. The invasion will begin in the southern Philippines and then strike northward, with the island of Leyte as the main objective. Once Leyte is taken, Manila and the liberation of the Philippines will inevitably follow. In the months leading up to the invasion, American carrier forces dominate the Pacific. Admiral William Bull Halsey's Task Force 38 launches relentless air attacks across Japanese-held territory, destroying airfields, sinking ships, and eliminating hundreds of Japanese aircraft. These attacks are so successful that Halsey urges an accelerated invasion timetable. Instead of waiting until December, he argues, Leyte should be attacked immediately. The Joint Chiefs agree, but the decision introduces dangerous complications. The invasion fleet will be protected mainly by the 7th Fleet, which relies on older battleships and lightly armored escort carriers. The approaching monsoon season prevents the use of nearby land-based airfields, forcing MacArthur to demand additional air cover from Halsey's powerful 3rd Fleet. Admiral Chester Nimitz agrees, but privately gives Halsey another order. If the Japanese fleet reveals itself, destroying it becomes the primary mission. MacArthur is never informed of this instruction, and communication between the 3rd and 7th Fleets is limited. Meanwhile, Japanese commanders understand that the Philippines are likely the next American target. Their response is Operation Sho-1, or Victory 1, a desperate and complex plan few officers believe can succeed. Years of losses have left Japan short of trained pilots, modern aircraft, and fuel, but the Imperial Navy still possesses a terrifying weapon: the Yamato-class battleships, the largest and heavily armed warships ever built. Sho-1 calls for multiple Japanese forces to converge on the American invasion fleet from different directions, while a carrier force with very few aircraft acts as bait to lure Halsey away from Leyte. The plan depends entirely on perfect timing and coordination. Before the invasion even begins, the first major clash occurs in the air over Formosa. In October 1944, American carriers launch over 1,000 sorties, overwhelming Japanese air defenses. Inexperienced Japanese pilots are thrown into combat and destroyed in staggering numbers. Although Japanese aircraft manage to damage a few American ships, the cost is catastrophic, with hundreds of planes lost. Despite the disaster, Japan presses on. On October 17, MacArthur's amphibious armada sails toward Leyte, and Sho-1 is activated. Almost immediately, the plan begins to unravel. Kurita's powerful surface force is delayed by refueling problems. Submarines require time to prepare. Ozawa's carrier pilots lack the training to land on carrier decks, forcing aircraft to be loaded by cranes. As Kurita's fleet passes through the Palawan Passage, American submarines strike first, sinking 2 heavy cruisers and killing hundreds of sailors, including the loss of Kurita's flagship. Yet even as Japan suffers these blows, luck intervenes. A single Japanese bomb penetrates the flight deck of the light carrier USS Princeton and detonates inside the hangar. Secondary explosions tear through the ship, killing hundreds of American sailors and forcing the carrier to be scuttled. With the invasion underway, Kurita pushes forward into the Sibuyan Sea, where American aircraft attack relentlessly. Their primary target is the massive battleship Musashi. Bombs and torpedoes slam into her again and again. Her crew fights flooding with desperate determination, but by nightfall, Musashi has absorbed an astonishing number of hits. She finally rolls over and sinks, taking roughly 1,000 men with her. Despite this devastating loss, Kurita continues forward. American commanders, seeing only his temporary withdrawal, mistakenly conclude that the Japanese threat has been neutralized. To the south, another Japanese force enters Surigo Strait and is annihilated in a devastating ambush by American battleships and destroyers in the last battleship gunnery duel in history. By the night of October 24th, it appears the Japanese plan has failed, but the most traumatic moment of the battle still lies ahead.